This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 336 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're talking about meeting interesting people on your travels. I'd like to firstly pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, who are the traditional owners of the beautiful land where I'm recording this podcast. So, today's episode is about meeting interesting people on your travels, not necessarily making lifelong friends, maybe making friends that you keep in touch with a bit, or maybe just meeting someone, getting to know someone, and then never seeing them again. But I do have many experiences myself, and I'm sure you do too, of just coming across interesting people when you're traveling. I think also we're a little bit more open to meeting new people or talking to other people when we travel. Obviously, we're not busy at work, we're a little bit more open and relaxed. So I think, that's possibly why it happens even more when we're traveling. Now, I thought of this just recently when I was showing my son photos from my backpacking trip around Tunisia, which I did way back in 2003. He was building a really interesting Minecraft build that kind of looked like that. And he was like, oh yeah, show me your pictures so I get some inspiration. So we looked through all of my Tunisian photos, but what I was pleased to see was I had a few photos with this super interesting guy I met on the train in Tunisia going to El Jem. So El Jem is actually a very amazing Colosseum. It's less crowded and smaller than Rome's Colosseum, but for me, equally impressive. You can look it up. But anyway, I met this Japanese guy who was on the train, the same train I was on, obviously. And I think his name was Risuke or something like that, definitely starting with R. And he was about the same age as me. I was traveling also with my boyfriend at the time, and we had until maybe 6 months earlier, we had been living in Japan. So we're especially excited to meet a Japanese person. And he was, Risuke, we'll call him Risuke for the purpose of my chat here. He was traveling solo through Tunisia, just with a backpack, really indie travel, same way we were. And, it's a pretty, especially back then, not very commonly visited place. And we were really surprised to see a solo Japanese traveler, especially back then. It was very unusual to see that. And especially he was kind of like a normal businessman. They have all these jobs there. They often will call themselves a salary man. So he had a normal quote unquote salary man type job back in Japan, had, I think, something like a business degree, but he spent his, vacation time doing these kind of solo travels. So it was super interesting to chat with him. We exchanged tips about where else we'd been in Tunisia, chatted many things about Japan and so on, and just had some really memorable conversations. We were connected on Facebook for a while, but I did check, and especially trying to check what his name was. And that's why I think it's Risuke. It starts with R.I., but he's got one of those shortened Facebook names that's not his real name. And I saw that he's connected just to me and one other person, hasn't been active on Facebook since 2014. So I think I'm not going to get a message back from him, but still remember him, still was really interesting experience. So I have 3 guests today who've had very interesting experiences meeting people on their travels. Now, my first one is Carol McQuaid, and she has spent some time in the last few years running art classes on board cruise ships. She's an artist and teacher, and this was the circumstance she was in when she met someone particularly interesting.
We did a world voyage at the start of this year. So as you know, I teach art on board. And on this particular voyage, this line only hires real performers as their cruise director. And the man who takes this role on this particular ship is 6'7" before the stilettos. So you can see where I'm going. He's just the biggest. He fills a room in a way that is just so beautiful. All of the passengers fall in love with him. All of the crew are in love with him. He does a Jesus Christ Superstar on rollerblades with a giant wig. And, he's the whole show. He's
Sounds
amazing.
fabulous.
Eric DeGray, if you're listening, we love you. So we had asked one of the dancers in his show if she would come and pose for a life drawing session, which, dancers love to do that. My students loved it. We got great drawings out of it. And Eric heard about this and he said, well, I would do it. I think he was half joking at first, but we jumped on it and said, absolutely, come and do it. The class all knew he was coming, and we do our art classes in an uninhabited restaurant in the off hours. So all of the students are showing up. I'm there. Everybody's gathering. We're all excited. We're going to get to draw this very interesting man. And we're waiting for him. And I'm thinking, gee, did he get busy? Was there a schedule conflict? And then from deep inside the restaurant, I hear this voice, Carol! I turn around and he is in full giant pink bouffant wig, sequined cape, fake fur. Like, I can't even comprehend all of the elements that were in his outfit. He's wearing more makeup on his face in this moment than I have collectively in my life. And all of the students, their faces just drop. And he's like, can I come out now? And he was hiding in the waiter station, all dolled up. So he walked out. I'm 5'8" to begin with. And I've got shoes on, and he is towering. He must have 6-inch stilettos. So he's 6'7" plus 6 inches. Don't make me do math, right? And
it's a lot.
It's a lot. He's 7'1", and he is standing there with his arm around me. I look like I am 4'2", and but he was amazing, and he posed so beautifully. And all of these fledgling artists who are coming to art class on their big adventure got to sit and draw him for a full hour. And we got the most beautiful paintings out of it. They drew him, I drew them drawing him, and we all got these fabulous drawings. And it just was such one of those moments of just a person being so emotionally available and sort of filling his role to the max. He was beautiful, and it just couldn't have been more fun. So
that sounds like one of those moments of pure joy.
Yeah.
Like the whole session is just everybody is happy and thrilled, and it's something is probably those people in your class are also telling this story over and over.
Exactly. Those sketchbooks are filtering out through the world, and everybody's getting to see that moment. And really, really fun. So fun things happen.
You must meet a lot of and get to know a lot of interesting people on those longer journeys, I guess.
It's really what is different about them. When you're on for the world voyage we did was 155 days. And we made a real community of friends, and that we still communicate with all the time. People end up doing I've got more trips planned with people from there already. And it is the community that makes the adventure. Just like anything, anybody can go to a place and look at, we call it the Chevy Chase, like standing in front of the Grand Canyon, tick, Eiffel Tower, tick. Like anybody can do all of those things, but it's always the people you meet and the interactions you have on your adventure that kind of illuminate it. And there's been no shortage of that out there at sea, that's for sure.
I love that description of the Chevy Chase tour of the world, just ticking off sites, and absolutely agree with Carol that very often it's the people that you speak with, the connections that you make that are the most memorable and important parts of travel. Now, my next guest today is Thomas Swick, an author who has spent, many years travelling the globe, had many, many experiences, and in this episode, he's sharing just some of the interesting people that he has met along the way.
My goal is always to meet people, because I'm writing about a place. I want to interact with the people. Ideally, it can be just one person, but I want to find somebody who I can maybe hang around with, do something with, experience the life of the place. And it's funny, oftentimes these people become your friends. Mm-hmm. I was in Lafayette, Louisiana once for a French music festival. They had bands from all over the French-speaking world. And the first night there was a little outdoor food court. There was the food stalls, and there were communal tables set up. And I got a bowl of gumbo, and I saw this guy, and he looked a bit like Woody Allen. He had these horn-rimmed glasses and kind of disheveled hair. And I said, he looks kind of interesting. And I just sat down with him, and we got talking. And sure enough, he wanted to be a stand-up. He worked for his father's lumber company, but he really wanted to be a stand-up comic, and he was hilarious.
Great.
And I ended up spending the whole weekend with him. He took me all around the region, and then we became friends. We emailed, and he came to visit me in Florida. And yeah, I mean, when things like that happen, it just makes the trip all that more interesting and meaningful, because you know somebody. It's not just the place where you had your vacation. Now it's the home of your friend. I find sometimes it's like that. It just happens. It's just serendipitous. You meet somebody. In the book, I write about running into a Greek guy on a bus in Greece, and he invited me for Greek Easter. He built a house on an island, and he invited me for Greek Easter, and that was just good fortune, just meeting somebody on the bus. Other times, I specifically go places in hopes of meeting people. And another thing I write about in the book, in 1981, in Poland, the food situation was very bad. We had ration cards for meat and rice and things. And Hanya and her family decided, since I had a passport, I could leave the country. They sent me to Vienna for Easter to do grocery shopping. And I did my grocery shopping, but then Easter Sunday came, and I went to church. I went to the Anglican church because I thought, well, there are going to be people who speak English. And sure enough, I met some wonderful people. There was a guy there, a Viennese guy, Austrian, who had lived in Poland for 6 months working with an Austrian bank. And he wanted to know all about what was happening in Poland then. And they invited me every Sunday after church. They'd go for pizza. And they invited me out with their friends to go have pizza. I never had Easter pizza before. I was so desperate for the company. I went, and it was just a delightful day. After lunch, his name was Herbie, and he took me to this mountain outside Vienna, which is where the Polish king, Jan Sobieski, forced back the Ottomans and basically saved Europe, for Christianity. And it's a famous battle, and it's a famous spot. But he showed me this place, and it was just by going to church. And after the church at Anglican churches, you usually have a coffee hour, and that's where I met him. So when I travel now, I often do go to the Anglican church and hope to meet people at the coffee hour.
Smart.
So yeah, it's going to places where you think you'll meet people, going places where the locals are. So those are my stories about meeting people.
Oh, they're fabulous. But it's also it's really important. Not only are you putting yourself in the way of this to happen, like you're deliberately doing it, but you're also super open to it. A lot of people, don't strike up a conversation with someone on a bus or they shy away from it or whatever. But yes, being open and just sort of the saying yes to Easter pizza or whatever, that's the saying yes is important.
Exactly. That's one of my rules, up to a point, just say yes. Yep. I mean, even if I don't feel like maybe going, to this thing or something, yes, do it. You'll never have that chance again.
Yeah, saying yes is key, isn't it? There are a few times I can look back on from my travels, especially when I was much younger, and especially if I was traveling solo, where I did say no, and I kind of regret it. I mean, I was doing what I thought was, safest at the time, but I remember especially when we had first arrived in Narva, which is in Estonia, just right across the border from Russia. It's almost a border town, and really lovely lady approached offering accommodation, and probably it was totally fine and would have been really lovely. And, Estonians I never met, every Estonian I met was super helpful and delightful, but perhaps I'd just come from Russia where I was being a bit more, overly cautious, and so I wasn't quite in the mood to meet anyone new, etc. But, I wish I'd gone with her instead of just going to a hostel where it wasn't quite as fun and interesting. But who knows? Can't go back now. Well, I'm going to go back to there one day, but I don't think I'll come across the same person. Anyway, my final guest today is Bex Thomas, and she has just a hilarious story about the kinds of lengths travellers go to. Once you're connected for life.
When we were travelling through New Zealand, my auntie texted me and said, "Oh, you have to go and look up this guy. His name's John, and he's a really, really close family friend of ours." Okay, great. He'd put you up. He'll look after you. just go and look up John. This is his address. Okay, we had nothing else, so we had no way of contacting John. I'll let John know you're coming. Okay, great. So when do you think you'll be able to get to John's? We were like, probably about 2 days' time. Okay, great. Anyway, so we rock up to this address. We knock on the door. This is my husband, myself, and my friend, Soph. We knock on the door and we ask for John. And John isn't home, but Ruth, his wife, is. And Ruth sort of looks at us very strangely and has no idea, obviously, who we are. So I said, oh, hi, I'm Cherry's niece and we've come to say hi to John. She said, oh, come in. I'm just having wine with the neighbour. So in we go, and there's a box of wine on the side. And sure enough, we start to have wine with Ruth, John's wife, and the neighbour. Anyway, this sort of afternoon continues on, and then suddenly John, we meet John.
The famous John.
The famous John. And we have, anyway, they are absolutely amazing. And they said, I hope you're staying, stay for a couple of nights or however long you want. So hospitable, so gorgeous. So we stayed. Ruth made the most amazing dinner. We had this wonderful dinner sat around this really long oak table in this beautiful New Zealand house. Their neighbour stayed for dinner. Another friend arrived who, bless him, only had 2 fingers on one hand because a possum had eaten or bitten off the other 3. So the stories that were told around this table.
Possible.
And he'd reared this possum from this baby possum. And so he was devastated. Anyway, all of these stories, this whole kind of amalgamation and mismatch of stories that are happening. Anyway, I just have this vision then of my husband trying to break macadamia nuts because John had given him some, and these macadamia nuts were flying everywhere. Anyway, needless to say, there was a fair amount of booze consumed, and my husband started to relax, which I think, having travelled with 2 girls, he'd been on edge, throughout and been the sort of carer, and so he started to relax. Anyway, this whole evening was just super special and wonderful. And something was said about my dad. And John said, I don't think I know James very well. I said, oh, right. But you know Cherry? Yeah. We kind of, I think we had a few, days sailing back in the day. Or we're like, when is this? Anyway, it turns out that, we are talking many, many, many years ago. And we are sat in this living room of these people who I'm not sure we really technically did know, but they've opened their house up to us and we've just had this absolutely amazing evening, and we stay another 2 days, and the irony is we've never spoken to them again. But my husband still has his card in his wallet. So we are talking, this is now probably 15 years on. And he still has his card in his wallet. So if we're ever back in that area in New Zealand, we will look John up. But what makes me really smile about travel is what goes round comes round. And we moved to Manly, and we'd been there about 6 months, and we were set up in an apartment, and we were sort of putting our feet under the table and everything like that. And suddenly I have an email from my uncle. Same auntie and uncle.
Right. I thought it might be.
And he's introducing a lad to us, and he said, Hugh is coming to Manly, look after him. I've said that there might be a sofa available for him. Okay, yeah, great. So I, carry on the email trail and I'm introduced to Hugh, and great, and whatever. Anyway, Hugh arrives. We give Hugh our spare room and say stay as long as you want, and please get used to Manly, we'll show you the sights. We take in Hugh, and about 4 days after Hugh stayed with us, my husband cooks roast dinner and we're sat around the table. I'm talking about my cousins, and he's like, I don't know them. Oh, right, okay. Oh, my husband says to him, well, they're Cherry's boys. Oh, I don't know Cherry. Oh, right. I said, but you know Simon? Yeah, I know Simon. I met Simon at my leaving do in the pub. I said, oh, right. Is that the first time you've met Simon? Yeah. So suddenly my husband's like, can I have a word? Takes me off and he's like, this guy that's in our house, do Do we know him?
We really don't know him.
No, technically I don't think we do, and I don't think maybe any of our family do. But anyway, Hugh was a joy. We're still connected to this day on Facebook, and that was about 5 years ago. But, I did say, my husband was like, well, I think we need to ask Hugh to leave. And I said, did John ask us to leave? He said, no, good point, he didn't. So for me, it's just that beauty of relationships, fast forwarding and being much more intimate, much more quickly when you're traveling and the other side of the world.
I absolutely love that. And it's a real example of what happens when people say yes, especially when people say yes when others land on their doorstep who are virtually strangers. And in fact, as it turns out, really very close to being complete strangers. So who would know? But everything went well, and I just love that story. So I hope you have also met some interesting people on your travels and would love to come and chat about that with us. Come over to the Facebook group or the LinkedIn group for Thoughtful Travellers. Just search for those in those platforms and you'll find us and tell us your tales. Thank you very much to my guest today. I started off chatting with Carol McQuaid, and you can find out more about Carol at theillustratedvagabond.com and look out there for her World Voyage sketchbook, which is gorgeous. I also chatted with Thomas Swick, and you can find out more about Thomas at his website, thomasswick.com. And you can also find his book, Falling into Place, A Story of Love, Poland, and the Making of a Travel Writer. I'll leave a link in the show notes for that. And last but definitely not least, I chatted with Bex Thomas. You can find out more about the work Bex does. She works with people who are wanting to go on sabbaticals and career breaks. Super interesting. And her website is feelgood-getaways.com. As always, links in the show notes for all of those, for the Facebook, LinkedIn groups as well, and for the Substack newsletter at thoughtfultravel.substack.com. And all of these links are in the show notes, notaballerina.com/336. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.